Kol omer kra, va'amar ma'ekra, kol habasar chatzir, v'chol chaso katzitz hasadeh, yavesh chatzir novel tzitz ki ruach Adonai nashva bo. Achein chatzir ha'am, yavesh chatzir novel tzitz udevar Eloheinu yakum leolam. A voice says, cry out. But I ask, what shall I cry? All flesh is like grass, and all of its beauty is like the flower of the field. The grass withers, and the flower fades, when a wind from God blows upon it. Surely, therefore, people are like grass. The grass withers, and the flower fades, but the word of God endures forever. LeDavid Mizmor l'Adonai haaretz umloa tevel v'yoshveva ki hu al yamim yasada v'al naharot yichaneneha. Mi ya'aleh bahar Adonai umi yakum bimkom kadsho. Neki chapayim uvar levav asher lo nasa lashav nafshi v'lo nishba lemirma. The earth is the Lord's with all of its fullness. The world is the Lord's with all of its inhabitants. Who may ascend the mountain of the Lord? Who may stand in the holy place? He who has clean hands and a pure heart. He will receive a blessing from the Lord and a just reward from the God of deliverance. We all recognize this from watching movies. If you watch movies long enough, you know they're the good guys and they're the bad guys. Whether it's a cowboy movie or whether it's a detective movie, or a romance movie. We know who the good guy is. Maybe he's wearing a white cowboy hat, or maybe he's the honest one. He's the one you can't corrupt, and you find yourself rooting for him. To succeed, to win the battle, to solve the mystery, to meet the woman of his dreams. Steve was the good guy. Steve was the good guy. He was the guy who was easy to root for. And everyone who met him realized and were touched by that. He was the one who cared about everyone. He made friends everywhere. He related to everyone as a peer. He put on no airs. There was no status separating one person from another. He mentored people. He helped his friends and his coworkers. He helped people get promotions, helped to guide them to move up in their career. He genuinely liked people and had a way of drawing them out as individuals. People felt secure with him. They trusted him. They engaged him. And he put his time and effort and sincerity into everything he took on. For Steve, there was no such thing as going halfway on something. If it's worth doing anything at all, it meant giving 100% of your efforts. He was the good guy. Tireless, committed to the good cause. Steve wanted to serve. He wanted to do public service, working for an affordable housing, helping the student loan program, helping students have somewhere to turn for student loans. I know teaching best practices, both in his most recent position, but worrying about being able to afford the things that people need. Being one of the good guys seemed to be in him from the beginning. Sherry, as long as you saw him, you knew several things about your son from the time he was little. Number one, he'd have lots of friends. Number two, you could be sure that willingly and eagerly he'd bring his little brother along with him. Not because, not to please his parents, not to appease anyone, but because Steve simply had a giving heart, a kind heart. He had an inclusive approach to life. Jeff, you were 6 years younger, but you were included in your brother's life all the time. You learned from him. You adored him. He was indeed a natural teacher, and it's an attribute he had all his life. It probably started with you. You two grew up in a household very close to your folks, very close to your parents, a warm and a healthy home where you learned values from your mom and from your dad. And Steve led the way for you at each step of life. You knew you could look up and look ahead and watch your brother and know that in watching him, you were preparing for your own decisions. He was your role model at all these critical moments of life. Sherry, your son was the good guy. Your son enjoyed childhood, but was clearly already thinking like an adult, thinking and behaving with adult values. He was strong-minded, he was willful, he was ready to engage the world. You told me about the article in the Plain Dealer, 10 years old, because he was already investing in the stock market. He liked music and trumpet. He liked playing sports with his friends. AZA, a huge sports fan. And he loved his religion. He loved the holidays, preparing for bar mitzvah. I know later he was president of the Hillel at college. His faith stayed with him always. When you met him, Mary Jane, you said that he always had this, from the beginning, you saw that there was this special quality. You couldn't even define it completely. But there was a quality he had that drew you two together. You loved his stories. He would tell stories of his parents, of his home, of his adventures with friends. He just always had a clever and a charming way of being with people. And he always made you feel protected. And he always made you feel cared for. You both found it so natural, really, to take care of each other from the beginning. You were friends for a long time before becoming a couple. I know you once interviewed him for the student newspaper, and you were surveyed about the interview. You gave him pretty high marks. You gave him even higher marks as a husband and as a father. At the core of your husband was an earnestness. It was a dedication to learning and to values and a way of making life fun. Your husband did some very important things in his life, and yet he could carry out very important responsibilities while still spreading the love and spreading the fun around. You said your first date, your first official date, was to have dinner at the end of Yom Kippur, right? It was break the fast. Now, the Jews, you have to understand, once the fast is over, breaking the Yom Kippur fast is an art form in the Jewish religion. It takes a lot of thinking, where you're going to go, who are you going to go with. And he carefully made that decision, took you, a restaurant a little out of the way, with all the anticipation of breaking the fast, and with a very inviting expression, the waitress welcomed you in and said, I know why you guys are here, because tonight's our big pork festival. Not exactly the way God wrote it up, I understand. During some of your courtship, you were living in different cities, and you would hang on to the hours you would have together, because time was precious and he never wanted you to leave. There are times in our life where we recognize how precious time is, and we try to savor it and we try to appreciate it. I don't know if we really always take it as seriously as we do it like on a date like today. Today we realize that time is precious, because time never, ever lasts forever. But for the time that he was blessed with in life, he lived it as truly one of the really good guys. You know, we've spent this whole week as a country talking about politics and government and making our nation better. You know, we don't always these days put the words government, politics, and good guys in the same sentence. We just don't. Your husband was one of those special people that could combine service to the public and good guy all in the same sentence. He took the values he had been taught in childhood. He added his own unique warmth and his intelligence and his dedication, and he used it out in the world to help people and influence their lives. If he indeed was a natural teacher and a man of great love and care, he combined all of those talents into the raising of your daughters. Rachel and Anna, he raised you, he was involved with you, he taught you, he modeled for you, and he made life fun for you. You always knew that he was thinking of you, whether he was with you or not, he was always thinking of you. He was always making you two feel loved. And indeed, he produced two loving and caring, committed, hard workers, dedicating to the values either in public service or in the private workplace, in day-to-day life. And you always knew you were loved. You know, in religion, we often use the word ritual, and sometimes when we use the word ritual, we're talking about Jewish holidays or lighting the candles, you know, something translating, reading the Hebrew. We always think of ritual in those ways, and those are important ritual ways. But your husband had other daily rituals. The daily ritual of being kind was his ritual, and the daily ritual of being honest, a daily ritual of feeling good about another's success, of extending a hand. Those were also his daily rituals. They were the rituals he lived with as well. He may have worried about finance. He was finance director, so he's worried about costs, but it doesn't cost a lot to be honest and decent and selfless. It just takes a good heart, and he always had a good heart. I just want to finish. There's a quote we used on our high holiday card this year, the one from Maya Angelou, that said, "People forget what you said and may even forget what you did, but they'll never forget the way you feel." I don't think people will forget what Steve said or what he did, but none of you will ever, ever forget the way he made you feel, because he always made you feel like you were a special part of his life. He lived with a good name, and he died with a good name. Jeff, you wanted to add some words?
I just had a few words to add. So I just want to thank you all for being here, of course, but we really shouldn't be here. It's too early for Steve, and my parents shouldn't be here, and Mary Jane, the love of Steve's life, and his two children, which he adored, shouldn't be here. But here we are, and we will get through it. I'd like to ask you now just to take a moment to think of a recent time you spent with Steve. So you know he was a mentor, a leader, and like a big brother to many of you. So for me, I was the fortunate one to have him as a literal big brother. And from my earliest memories, I was able to talk with Steve about big issues, life, love, work, and yes, sports is a big thing with him. What was unique for me is that I had a crystal ball to my future. I learned from Steve ahead of time, what it was to be a husband, a father, and especially a mensch, which I think is a word everyone comes to mind when we think of Steve. I will miss this a lot. I could recount so many times that Steve supported me, as I'm sure you all could. But I know that now he would want us to support each other through this time. And as I told my kids, let's think of what would make Uncle Steve proud as we continue to make our decisions and go through life together. So I just want to convey that to everybody else as well. So thank you.
I want to read words that Rachel wrote on behalf of her father. This is from Rachel. I loved and love my dad. When he passed on Friday, my mom and I started thinking about the overwhelming number of people we would want to call. That, I immediately thought, was a true testament to just how many lives my dad touched. I learned a lot about my dad's professional life because when I was in between jobs, he gave me the project of helping him out with his CV. He traveled a lot, learning about governmental accounting practices to then teach emerging leaders and international students how to manage the financial infrastructure of their communities. To be honest, though, what stuck with me most about his travels is how much he kept our family in mind wherever he went. Every time my dad went to a new city, he researched the local concert venues, coffee shops, radio stations, and more to pick me up a memento that made me feel like I'd been with him in spirit. He got me a shirt from Cafe Mediterranean, the coffee shop where it was believed that Allen Ginsberg wrote Howl, because he knows I love beat poetry. He stopped by the grunge bar, the Crocodile, in Seattle, to pick up a shirt when I was at the peak of my Nirvana and Mudhoney phase. Just the visual of him stopping in there still makes me laugh. One time in New York, he grabbed me a shirt from the Blue Note Jazz Club to commemorate our tradition of seeing live jazz together at Bohemian Caverns and Blues Alley in D.C., and because he knew the many Blue Note artists he'd shared with me helped shape my taste in music. He even brought this thoughtfulness to finding ways for me to celebrate in the city of Richmond, where I live. We have a beautiful historic theater called The Bird that honestly looks like it's straight out of Phantom of the opera, with a glistening chandelier and beautiful opera boxes overlooking the hall. For my birthday this year, my dad tried to contact the theater to get me a gift card to go see a show with a friend at this local landmark he'd researched. They don't have a box office phone number online. In fact, all they have is the email address of the organist who plays the theater's original Wurlitzer on Saturday nights. So my dad wound up exchanging emails with this 85-year-old organist about a gift certificate. And unfortunately, this man whose only real involvement with the theater is playing a 10-minute show tuned mildly each week was unable to help him. What my father didn't know is that, like many things in Richmond, the Bird Theater's actual purpose was different than what its historic facade would suggest. The Bird is actually our local cash-only $2 theater. So they have no number, since no one but my dad would ever think to purchase a gift card. And yet my dad did all this research and correspondence just to make one thoughtful gesture. You all know my dad, and I'm sure you can think of one time where he said or did something and you thought to yourself, wow, he remembered I was interested in that? I always had trouble believing him when he said he was an introvert, just because of how much he seemed to thrive and become energized off of making connections with others. I can think of no better way to celebrate my father than to have so many of his loved ones connect and look out for each other, the same way he did for each of us each day. His passing is going to be a challenge for all of us, but I know that if we can care for one another and show kindness and selflessness, we will carry on his values and legacy. Thank you. Thank you, Rachel. Very nice. Let's now rise for the memorial prayer. El Mole Rachamim, Shochein Bamromim, Hamitzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Hashchina, Bemalot Kedoshim, Utehorim, Kezor Rakia Mazhirim, Et Nishmat Yisrael ben Sholem v'Shendel, Shahalach Lolamo, Began Eden Tehei Menuchato, Anabal Harachamim Astirehu, Beseter Knafecha Leolamim, Utror Bitzrecha Mit Nishmato, Adonai Hu Nachalato, V'yanuach B'Sholom Amishkavo, V'nomar Amen. May we remember all of the worthy and the righteous deeds that he performed while in the land of the living. God is now his portion. May he rest in peace. And we all say amen. Let's all be seated. We want to offer our condolences to the family, to Mary Jane, to Rachel, Anna and John, Sheldon and Sherry, Jeff and Rachel, and Juliana and Adam, Susan and Terry, Johanna. The family will be receiving visitors for the Shiva visitation immediately following the burial portion of the service, and that will be today at Landerhaven, today until 8 p.m. That's the visitation for today, is at Landerhaven until 8 p.m. Now, tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday, we'll be at the Solomon Home in Cleveland Heights, 3564 Blanche Avenue. 3564 Blanche Avenue in Cleveland Heights. That will be tomorrow and Thursday from the hours of 2 to 4 and then again 7 to 9 p.m. So it's today until 8 p.m. at Landerhaven, tomorrow at the Solomon Home from 2 to 4 and 7 to 9, and again Thursday 2 to 4 and 7 to 9. Let's remain in our seats for a few more moments. We're going to arrange the processional for the journey to the cemetery. The pallbearers now should now come forward.